Good morning, everybody, and very warm welcome to our TÜV meetup on medical device regulation. My name is Joachim Bühler. I'm the Managing Director of the TÜV Association. Well, we have a very intense debate on the healthcare reform here in Germany. At the European level, we are heading a new regulation on medical device regulation, which has maybe even an impact as strong as the German debate, maybe even stronger, because more than 400 million people in Europe are affected. And this regulation has very strong impacts. It has impacts on patient safety. It has impacts on the question, how do we regulate new technologies such as artificial intelligence used in medical devices? And it also touches very strong topics like the resilience of the European Union. Just remember, well, the COVID crisis or the COVID period where we were struggling to get enough protective equipment for our continent. So it's a very, very important debate. And the debate is at the moment still at the European level. And we want to start a very strong and intense public discussion because we believe that it's really important for the European Union. It's a question for the next century, and we have to discuss about it, not only on a technical level, not only with an expert, but also on a broader public discussion. This is what we want to do now, and we have a very interesting and very competent panel for that. And the introduction of our panelist and the moderator of today is my colleague and the head of Brussels office, Johannes Grünert. I will hand over to him now, and I wish you all a very interesting debate on the medical device regulation for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joachim, and a warm welcome from my side as well. Today's discussion comes indeed at a very important moment. The European Commission presented its proposals to revise the EU medical device legislation in December last year, and the discussions in the European Parliament and in the Council are now moving ahead. The objectives of the revision are clear: reducing unnecessary burdens, improving the availability of medical devices in Europe, whilst maintaining a high level of patient safety. However, the central question remains, can these objectives truly be reached together, or is there a risk that simplification could come at the expense of patient safety? I am very pleased that we have an excellent panel with us today to discuss these questions from very different perspectives. So let me already directly introduce our 5 speakers of today. From the European Commission, I'm pleased to welcome Flora Giorgio. Flora is the head of Unit for Medical Devices within the Directorate General for Health and Food Safety, and she has been leading the revision of the MDR and IVDR. A warm welcome to you, Flora. From the European Parliament, we have Timo Wilken with us. Timo is the group's shadow rapporteur on the revision in the responsible Public Health Committee, and so he's also actively involved in the ongoing negotiations. Timo, thank you also for being here today. From industry, I'm pleased to welcome Julia Steckeler. Julia is Managing Director of Medical Mountains, a cluster and network organization for medical technologies with over 600 medtech manufacturers involved, including many SMEs. Welcome to you, Julia.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. From the consumer perspective, we have Ancela Santos with us. Ancela is Head of Food, Health and Chemical Safety at the European Consumer Organization BEUC, which brings together more than 40 national consumer organizations from over 30 countries. Very glad to have you with us, Ancela. And last but not least, from the conformity assessment bodies, let me welcome Dr. Reut von Hahn. He is Senior Vice President Medical and Health at TÜV Süd, which is one of the largest notified bodies for medical devices. Also, thanks for joining us today, Reut.
Oh.
Well, it's great to have you all with us. And with that, let's start directly with the discussion. And my first question goes to you, Flora. Now, you and your team are responsible for the revision of the medical devices legislation in the European Commission. When we look at the current MDR and IVDR, they are fairly recent regulations. They are not that old, but still they have become the focal point of criticism. What are, in your view, the main issues with the current legislation? Why do we need a revision? And perhaps you could outline a bit the main changes that you have been proposing.
Well, first of all, I hope you hear me well. First of all, Jonas, thank you for organizing this event and this discussion also at a very critical time, as you said. Let me go straight in the question. You mentioned this as being a recent legislation, and true, de facto it's recent on the paper in the sense that we had to extend, the full application of this regulation is not there yet. Having said that, this regulation was conceived in 2012, so more than 20 years ago, in response of a public health crisis, which was a criminal fraud, and has been negotiated for 5 years and was adopted in 2017. So what we are today asking our sector to implement is a concept and is a framework which was conceived 20 years ago, where the type of technologies and the way healthcare systems were working and the way healthcare institutions were working were, I would say, very different from what we have today and what we will have in the next 10 to 12 years, to 20 years. And that's where we start from to a certain extent. We consider this revision comes not because the Commission had this interesting, objective. I think there was a strong call first from the European Parliament for the first mandate. There were a number of structural problems that we had to address by extending the transitional provision. So we had to amend the transitional provision 4 times, as everybody knows. We got a lot of concerns and call from users due to the shortages of devices. And what you said, can this proposal merge patient safety with innovation and competitiveness? If we do not have devices on the market for European patient and professional, that's for us the major issue of patient safety. So the proposal comes because we also have been trying to implement this regulation since 2017 in the Commission with the competent authority, with the notified bodies, with all the key players. And I think the diagnosis is quite clear. The system has a noble and great objective, which we all subscribe to, but the way these objectives are being or should have been achieved are probably not delivering the outcome that we were all expecting. And when I say all, the Commission, when made the proposal, the co-legislator, when they negotiated, and the stakeholders that have tried to implement. So we had to go to the proposal because of the, of the signal, because we have conducted a targeted evaluation that pointed actually to the administrative burden, to the legal uncertainty, to the duplication, and to the procedure that may also become too complex and too costly to actually comply with, and resulted at the end in a shortage. So that's why what mainly we don't touch the objective, and we don't touch, and you will see also in the proposal, the provision for high risk classes mainly, for example, but we try to really adjust the cursors of the different provision to make it more proportionate, even more, if possible, risk-based approach. And we also look at specific needs for innovation in special type of devices. So we introduced the breakthrough, the orphan devices. Things were not on the radar 20 years ago. We also try, and I think in the current context is particularly important, to strengthen a bit and recognize the international dimension of the proposal. I'll stop here because I think that I could talk the whole hour telling you what the proposal is doing, but for the sake of time, what I think it's important to retain proportionality, simplification on certain provision, recognize that not all devices, we're trying to implement one size fits all approach. It doesn't work fully. And it doesn't work also in the context of the current resources available to implement. That's why we also, an important part of the proposal, which is an innovation in this respect, is to strengthen the support to competent authority and in general to all players on a European coordination and availability of scientific basis to the system, which is another challenge we are experiencing while implementing the proposal. So I stop here and I'll leave the floor, sorry to that.
Yeah, you mentioned already a number of issues: administrative burden, too long, too costly procedures, more proportionate, some specific rules for breakthrough devices. I think we will be touching upon some of the points later on. But Julia, over to you. A lot of the criticism, in fact, came from medical device manufacturers. How do you now, from an industry perspective, evaluate the Commission proposal? Is this proposal addressing your concerns? Is it leading to the necessary simplification that you have been calling for?
Well, yes, actually it does. From a manufacturer's perspective, the proposal is absolutely necessary and a necessary step towards what Flora said: more proportionate, workable, and a predictable regulatory framework. It addresses several of today's biggest challenges for the manufacturers, like excessive burden, documentation burden and cost, repeated review of very similar products and technical documentation, lack of proportionality for mature, well-established technologies, and about, of course, growing concerns about product availability and innovation, because as you know, we did a survey and 35% of manufacturers have reduced their R&D activities due to the MDR. More than 40% launch innovations outside Europe first, and 64% of orphan device manufacturers have already discontinued products. So the challenge is maintaining innovation, competitiveness, and patient access to very safe existing and innovative medical technology in Europe. So the revision could become a blueprint for really smarter regulation in Europe. And it's about transferring the regulation from a system that rewards repetition towards a system that rewards evidence where the real risks are. So, to keep it short.
You're all very short and concise. Thank you, Julia. Now, simplification, of course, is a huge issue. But as you said, the proposal also aims to uphold the high level of product and patient safety. And Ancella, this is now the turn to you. From the perspective of the consumer or patient, what is your take on the proposal? Will patients in future be still adequately protected?
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us. Listen, I think the 2017 regulations had raison d'être. We came from some safety scandals, and there was a general understanding that we needed stricter oversight and requirements pre-post-market. We always say that it's a pity that the patients, consumers have not really get to achieve or to reap the full benefits of the regulations because they have not been fully implemented. And I think there are different reasons for that. Definitely more resources should have been allocated to its implementation. Now, we have the Commission's proposal for a targeted revision, which I think goes a little bit beyond the targeted revision. And some speakers have mentioned the need to ensure availability, to support innovation. And yes, sure, I think that's, so from a consumer perspective, we need new, innovative devices that meet unmet needs. We also need that devices are available on the market, but of course, we need reassurance that they are safe. And I think we need to find the right balance between these different objectives that are all very legitimate. What we understand by simplification and where we think it could, let's say, help is by cutting really red tape, so redundant administrative procedures, or by ensuring like more efficiencies, bringing efficiencies into the system through also greater cooperation, which is something that the Commission has proposed. And we also think it's important to help manufacturers to better navigate the system, also by providing scientific advice and coming up with specific measures for specific devices for which there are challenges, so orphan devices, breakthroughs, as have been mentioned. Now, when you look at the table, the simplification table, and you look exactly at the proposals that the Commission has made, in our perspective, it goes too far in terms of scope, extent, of what is required, really. And we are concerned that it starts compromising on safety, which is an element that is necessary, because yes, we need devices on the market, but we need reassurances that they are safe and that they perform well. We need this reassurance, and also public health systems at the end of the day that pay also for many of these devices. So we have come up with some proposals on how to strengthen the Commission proposal. There are some red lines in our recommendations. In other areas, we try to come up with maybe a more balanced approach. And I think that's an exercise that we have done, but also patient groups, healthcare professional groups. And I think we are all important stakeholders in this debate. And it's also important to take into account the concerns that we are raising and look also and consider the proposals that we are making to ensure a better balance. And just a last comment, I think we also need to take into account the context in which this simplification exercise takes place. This is not just limited to medical devices. We have simplifications of key pieces of legislation across sectors, many omnibuses, no impact assessments, very fast-track procedures, very difficult for civil society to engage. And I think the medical devices proposal that has been made by the Commission, the simplification exercise, I think needs to be seen also from this perspective. And this is why we raised some concerns and we have made proposals to make the Commission proposal more balanced.
Wonderful. Now we've heard from manufacturers and consumers. Droht, as TÜV Süd, you are assessing medical devices before they are placed on the market. So you ensure that they are actually safe and compliant. So same question to you. What is your take on the proposal? More simplification, but less protection?
Yeah, so I think we all agree that something had to be done. Now, for the issues we had over the last years in introducing MDR, we need to distinguish which problems are really due to the requirements in the MDR itself and which problems were caused by the way the transition was defined. Because a lot of the issues, especially in the first years, had root causes that are not in the requirements of the MDR, but in the way the transition was defined. And with that, I mean certifying all devices and all scopes that already had been on the market before. That was really a huge burden for industry and for all the other stakeholders, as well as the authorities and also the notified bodies to go through everything that was already on the market. I would also like to draw attention to the way we are now trying to reduce the burden on all stakeholders here, but we need to be very careful that we don't make a preventive system into a reactive system. And so we need to maintain certain levels of scrutiny, and we also should look at the flexibility the European system always had under the MDD and also under the actual MDR, especially in the mid-range risk, so class 2A, class 2B devices, which was kind of hidden in the last couple of years because of this transition burden. Where we need to look at is not so much on the safety-related aspects, but on the administrative-related aspects. And we also should bear in mind that I think in the first 4 years of MDR in place, we had more than 100 documents to consider additionally issued to explain the content and how it is to be interpreted. That is where we need to really reduce the burden. And then, of course, there are some things also Julia referred to, like testing the same product over and over again. That doesn't make sense. And these kind of things have to be addressed so that we have less administrative findings and we can really focus on the technical ones. But for those, a certain level of scrutiny is still necessary.
Don't look at the safety-related aspects, but at the administrative aspects. Timo, over to you. You are a member of the Public Health Committee, so it is now up to you and your colleagues to make amendments to the Commission proposal. Now, we've already heard some feedback, quite mixed, as you've heard. So what is your impression of the proposal, and where do you think Parliament can simplify without lowering standards? And where, in your view, would simplification go too far?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invitation and thank you for the easy question. So obviously we are also still looking at the proposal, but I would like to echo what the others already said. I think the proposal is a substantial one and already heading into important aspects, so which we have to change. I would like to remind that from Parliament's perspective, I think we should not forget why we have the MDR and the IVDR. So we had the scandals in the past involving harmful breast implants and all that, faulty hip implants, and this has demonstrated that we need European standards. And so we, as S&D, we will always have the patient's safety in the center of our interest. At the same time, both MDR and IVDR have created, I think, significant challenges for the industry over the years, and we have heard a few examples already. So for us, duplicate assessments, overlapping reporting obligations, limited harmonization and oversight, as well as the insufficient use of digital solutions, I think have led to heavy administrative burden for both authorities and economic operators. So Parliament has recognized these issues for a long time and called for the revision now. So we will look into all these areas. And I think the proposal is important and a welcome step towards addressing these long-standing implementation challenges. And I hope that it will improve efficiency, reduce unnecessary administrative burden, and the introduction of digital solutions and coordinated application procedures further enhance the predictability and coherence. So many of the proposed simplifications, I think, respond directly to these concerns. So coming to an end, however, and this is the caveat, simplification alone will not resolve all structural issues, right? So effective implementation will require sufficient capacity and resources for notified bodies and competent authorities, greater harmonization across member states, a fully operated and clear regulatory guidance to ensure consistent application across Europe. So, and now, at the same time, simplification should not come at the expense of transparency or stakeholder involvement. So this is also something we will look at. Strong patient engagement and predictable regulatory processes remain, I think, essential for maintaining trust in the system. And the scandals, which were the root cause for these legislations, should be kept in mind that patient safety is our biggest priority. And if I remember correctly, I think one of my first speeches was indeed that we didn't have, when I came to Parliament, that we had too few benannte Stellen, I don't remember the English word now. So I think that this is an issue close to my heart, but at the same time very important for European citizens and industry. So we have to finally address the problems, and especially the problem of not having enough notified bodies. That's the right word. So, okay, at the first, maybe too long statement already, but I think we share all here more or less the same feeling about the proposal by the Commission. So very, very happy to work on this.
Yes, wonderful. Now we are right into the discussion, and I see two hands up. Just to give a short summary, I think there seems to be a common understanding that the current system does not function well, that we need to make rules more clear, more concise, more practical to be fully effective. But at the same time, there is this fear that the simplification might lead to even deregulation or even a lack of certain safety. But Flora, I mean, you have been addressed in the comments. I would give you the opportunity now to respond, perhaps also to ask you what are really the safeguards in the proposal that ensure that patient safety remains fully protected.
No, thanks a lot. And maybe I can elaborate further on one of the concepts I tried to introduce at the beginning. I think this proposal, I mean, first 2 points, this proposal needs to be looked at in its entirety. It's several changes, as you know, Ansela said, maybe goes beyond the targeted evaluation. I think we had a very difficult choice to make. We could try to make cosmetic and adjust minor things, or we could also try as a result of the targeted evaluation. And the targeted evaluation means we don't change the system. Nobody plan to, how can I say, compromise on the objective on that, but really to try to improve what can be improved. And what came out of the targeted evaluation and the call for evidence and the many targeted consultation we had with different key players and stakeholders is that you touch there, but if you touch there, you need to think about this, and that as well. Because if not, you create this safety loop that you want. What we didn't want to do is exactly doing that. So creating the mechanism that by improving, but by removing some burdens, repetition, and duplication, you still maintain the safety net that are needed. And it was said, that it becomes a reactive system. No, I think the system is exactly the opposite. We are trying to make a system where everybody, however, gets a bit more accountability and responsibility on their task. Let me give you an example, which was also one of the points that BEOC and some organization put, the SUR, the Patient Safety Update Report. No, currently you have it annually. So we have in this regulation for many reporting on an annual basis, must be on an annual basis. In some cases, we even have at least annually, and some interpreted this as 4 times a year, which means work, costs, and for what? That's a bit there. So what we are doing now with the proposal, in the PSUR, we say for the high-risk classes, you do the first year, what? The first year, because it's the year where you get the major exposure. So you have the major exposure of patient to the devices, and then on every 2 years, with the possibility for the notified bodies to increase the frequency, because that's what, we have. I think the notified bodies are the key gatekeeper of the safety of the devices, and they should be given also the responsibility, and if I may say, the recognition that they are in the position actually to request more if it's needed, but also request less if it's not needed, because it's a matter of proportionality. In an ideal world, yes, would be great. Every year, every report, but there are not enough resources in the system to actually ensure that. And we think in the optic of proportionality, this is probably not the best use of resources. Another example, which is also very, I can say sometimes misunderstood in the term of the famous recertification. No? They say the Commission remove the recertification. No, the Commission does not remove the recertification. The Commission remove the validity date of the certificate on that creates often administrative issue in terms of when you do procurement. Of course, if the certificate is not valid, it shouldn't be valid, but you don't need a validity date, but you maintain a periodic review. Periodic review, which we fully understand needs to be, and we commit to detailed in tertiary legislation, because you may not need to reassess every 5 years every device, but you may need to assess breakthrough every 2 years, and a device that has been safe on the market with no safety signal every 7 years. Of course, this gives a bit of uncertainty to, and we got some concern and we are not sure. But I think we are also trying to have a system, as I said, more targeted to the risk classes, because not all devices in the same risk classes are the same, and more proportionate and efficient to use better the resources we have. This is a bit the background. And then also, I fully take into account the comments that the clinical community, patient users has made. And I think many of those comments are actually the result also of some of our provision that maybe are not very clear on how we implement it, but I see that the objective are very much on the same on the same direction. And well, I'll stop here because of the time, sorry, but I will have more to say. But
yeah, it is a very complex topic. I think this became clear. Julia, you raised your hand. You can directly reply.
Yes, well, I also think the debate should not focus on whether there's more or less oversight. The real question is which type of oversight protects best the patients. So the proposal is not about reducing oversight. It's about replacing routine oversight with a smarter, with a risk-based oversight. And this is why I say it should be viewed as a new approach with fundamental principles, because competent authorities continue to survey the market. Notified bodies continue to assess and oversee compliance. Manufacturers remain responsible for their products, and risk-based intervention remains possible at any time, and all core safety mechanisms remain fully in place. They are not removed. We have GSPR, risk management, clinical evaluation, post-market surveillance, vigilance, market surveillance. Everything is there. So it's not a weaker system. Patient safety is not an audit outcome. Patient safety is a system outcome, in my opinion. And notified bodies are not the only source of patient safety. It's a result from the interaction of every and all stakeholders. So in my view, one of the strongest safety elements of the proposal is also the greater emphasis on for-cause intervention, because everybody has the chance to escalate if some safety issues arise, or not safety issues, if some triggers arise that you have to have a further look on it or a closer scrutiny to the companies. So, and also I want to go with that what Flora said. The proposal also recognizes an important principle for the manufacturers. A system that never rewards good performance ultimately becomes a system of permanent mistrust by everybody. So if manufacturers consistently demonstrate safe products, an effective quality management system, a stable PMS and vigilance data, regulation should recognize that performance. And such recognition, of course, is not permanent. It lasts as long as there are no signals that there has to be a further scrutiny. And if proven safe devices in the end disappear from the market because of unnecessary regulatory burden, well, we all may have achieved regulatory perfection on paper, but this doesn't help the patient at all. Because if these products disappear.
Yeah, you named already a lot of points, Reut, and I think a lot of them were also directed to you as notified bodies. In the past, you have faced quite a lot of criticisms for procedures being too lengthy and too costly. Now the Commission has reduced a number of surveillance measures. Will we still remain all the safety mechanisms that Julia said, or do you fear that really there is a weakening of oversight?
Oh, there definitely is. I mean, the term for cause alone says it's reactive. We are sitting there and waiting until something happens, until we find an indication, and then we step in. So that's definitely a paradigm change here. So, but not only that, I would also like to highlight some other aspects here. I don't think that it is good enough to just say, well, yeah, notified bodies can do this, and that. There need to be clear requirements on how this is to be done. And because we need consistency, we need to have that harmonized across all of the notified bodies for all of the manufacturers. And I would also like to refer to a number that industry put out, that the direct cost of notified body surveillance and activities is only 7% of the total compliance cost. So the majority of the cost is with the manufacturers itself and their administrative burden. And only focusing on the activities of the notified bodies, I think, is just not enough. Looking at that, also regarding the concern of products disappearing from the market, I don't think that the regulatory cost is really the decisive factor. The business case for a product is mainly addressed by, or mainly defined by, the reimbursement scheme, and not, so how much do I get for the application of the device or for the device itself through reimbursement. That is defining the business case, not so much the regulatory burden. But it is obvious that the regulatory burden under MDR increased significantly for the manufacturers. And there are certain product areas that are highly affected by that. And I fully agree, we need to do something about this. The way we would like to see that is that we start with a high level of scrutiny and then introduce the reduction of these measures based on experience, based on evidence, on a track record from the manufacturers. They should not given that for free, but they should earn this trust and confidence in what they are doing, so that there are defined criteria for reducing oversight, for reducing elements like unannounced audits, like the sample frequency in class 2 devices, like the audit frequency. All that can be done if we have enough confidence, and confidence needs to be based on evidence. So that's the element, I think, where that we should introduce. Start with a higher level of scrutiny and then let them earn it. And that had two benefits for the industry. First of all, they can distinguish with this. It's not like everyone is the same, and we know not every manufacturer really earns that trust. We are looking at mainly, if we are looking at European manufacturers, we are looking at very solid companies. They have an own interest, they have a brand value. So they have an intrinsic motivation to deliver good products, and they do. And they definitely deserve that trust. But the reality the notified bodies live in is different. We are seeing manufacturing sites, and if we don't go there unannounced, we don't see people bare feet sitting on the floor in a clean room packaging sterile devices. That is the reality we live in. And we need these instruments as mandatory, not for cause, as mandatory instruments to have the manufacturers earn the trust. And then we can gradually or in steps reduce that. But clear requirements, starting high and then reducing. That's our approach here, and that's what we would like to contribute to the discussion.
Start with a high level of scrutiny and then earn the trust. Ancella, you have been nodding. You agree?
Yeah, thank you. I fully agree, and I think it has been very well, explained and put by Royce. And I would like to go back to the question of recertification, because that's part of what he was saying. When the MDR, so when the Commission made the proposal from the MDR, IVDR, there was an impact assessment. The 5 years, so the time limited validity of certificates back then was not identified as an issue. And so we continue having this 5-year certificates. What was identified back then as an issue is that we didn't have enough clinical evidence. We needed better clinical evidence from manufacturers. So that's the difference. Now we have an evaluation report that has looked at the regulations mainly from an economic perspective. And the Commission comes with a proposal to scratch completely the recertification and replace it by a looser, more flexible system, periodic reviews. So for us, the economic arguments, as a consumer organization, it's not convincing. And we always say recertification brings it's an extra check, extra safeguards, and recertification looks at the device in a more holistic way than the checks that are done then in post-marketing. And recertification is not only about safety, it's also about performance. So for us, at least, what we have tried is to come up with a more balanced approach, because we think the Commission proposal is too drastic. And we say, let's have at least the devices recertified once, and then we can move to a more risk-based approach, with some devices then having unlimited, let's say, certificates. Others maybe need to go through one more certification, or we say targeted assessment, going into the direction of what the Commission proposed. So the full recertification once, and then we can move from then onwards on a more risk-based approach. But again, I repeat, there was an impact assessment, and these 5-year validities were not identified as an issue. We now have an evaluation mainly driven by economic considerations, not safety considerations. So it's not convincing for us to scratch completely the recertification. And I fully agree that we need enough safeguards at the beginning, and then maybe we can have some flexibilities later on. But having enough safeguards at the beginning, at the starting point, that's key.
Flora, I will give you the time to respond. Please, very short, as we also want to dive into other topics. But I guess you have some points to make.
very quickly. I think, again, I want to reiterate, which I seem not to be clear, we do not remove the principle of looking at at looking and continuous monitoring. We remove the validity date and we introduce with periodic review. Point taken that the periodic review needs to be clarified, and Riot also said you need to define criteria, when and how often. We would expect that also the notified bodies, in the many years that we are supporting them also to coordinate and to create more harmonization, this could be done with the notified bodies. And I think we do have this very constructive cooperation with the notified bodies through the NBCG Med, which we also strengthen in the proposal, that we really get together and set what Ansela also was saying. For me, we call it periodic review or you call it recertification. It doesn't change. We keep the mechanism, we remove the validity date, and we see every X number of years there needs to be a periodic review. And the periodic review looks at what is needed to be looked. What we looked in the implementation, because an impact assessment is an impact assessment done ex ante, and for this one it was done, as I said, 20 years ago. We are living in a different world, and we have also quite some experience implementing the current framework. So I think it is important to refer to that experience as well. And we simply see that the recertification became an extra thing, which wasn't really bringing the benefit that was expected. Having said that, we fully agree on the fact that there needs to be a periodic check, scrutinized and harmonized. And that's where we put empowerment. Should have we put it as, there are alternatives now, and I think now is for the co-legislators to adjust, I hope adjust the cursor, because I see the same objective. But the last point, and also from these 4 causes, and this comes from many things, 4 causes, when needed, these are all things that need to be, how can I say, clarified and detailed. Yeah. Empowerment. Maybe we should have done it in the proposal. I think for a future-proof mechanism, maybe it's better to have that flexibility. But I fully take the point that it has to be addressed. But I was a bit concerned in saying that this proposal comes on economic consideration, and the economic consideration came from the impact assessment when it was done. When we did the targeted evaluation in the close, we asked users, clinicians, do you have evidence to show that all requirements increase safety? And we didn't get very strong feedback. And that's where we come from. But I stop here, sorry.
Thank you, Flora. Ansela, I know you have, one sentence, okay? Because then we
just
need to
very
move on.
quickly. I think the problem is that we don't have enough experience with implementation. First of all, the regulations have not been fully implemented, and then there have been extensions of the transition period. So we don't have enough. I think it has not been given a chance. Let's put it this way. So voilà, I just wanted to maybe make this point.
Julia, one sentence as well, and then we move on. Okay.
Just to add this, we don't even have evidence that the MDR enhanced patient safety. There is no evidence that products have been are better through the MDR. And one perspective that is missing today in this debate is maybe the one of healthcare professionals, because healthcare professionals, they do experience all the outcome of the implementation so far, because for them the key question is not how many documents were reviewed or had the calendar indicated after 5 years that there has to be a new audit. It's not calendar driven. It has to be evidence driven, as White said before, because they only experience that they are missing products that they need and products that have been safe on the market for more than 20 or 30 years. And there is enough evidence, and you don't have to create new clinical evidence for products that have been in safe use by them for many years. And if you talk to them, they are desperate because they said, well, but they have been safe. They had been safe. There is evidence, but this evidence is not recognized under the actual MDR. So there has to be made changes.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. Reut, Flora, I would continue now, but I will give you the opportunity to respond afterwards.
No problem.
I would like to bring back Timo into the discussion, because Yes.
No need to do that. I'm happily listening and taking notes, and let's see what our proposals will look like at the end. No, but honestly, so I'm following this debate, and I think for me, there is a lot of added value in listening to all of you, and then just observing. So I'm not bored, don't worry, but I can obviously come in if you like, but I don't have to at this
Well,
point.
Timo, I do have a specific question for you. We are talking about the interplay between simplification and patient safety, but I think there is another important aspect in this debate which we have not touched upon, and this is resilience. Many European medical device manufacturers, especially SMEs, are already facing strong international competition, including from Asia, for example, in public procurement. So the question to you, Timo, if we lower regulatory requirements, isn't there the risk that the European market becomes even more attractive to non-EU manufacturers? And could this increase Europe's dependence on medical devices produced outside the EU? It is not an easy question, but I think it is still an important point to keep in mind.
Yeah, obviously. So the resilience question is one you discuss in every area of politics at the moment, and but the answer is always very difficult, because becoming more resilient is nothing we can do by simply switching it on. So we need a strategy for that, and we need time. So I think that we should try to achieve something. First, we cannot simply lower our standards to become more resilient. This would be, I think, a bit, this would be too easy and not being an adequate answer. So what we need to achieve is to make Europe less bureaucratic, so to reduce bureaucracy, while at the same time maintaining the highest safety standards. And following the debate today, I think there are some good ideas already on the table. But what I would like to also remind everyone is that when it comes to medical devices made in Europe, I think this is something patients and consumers really care about. Because if you use a product which is placed in your body, you want to have the best available solution, and maybe you want to trust the manufacturer. So medical devices made in Europe should stand for, and this is what I honestly believe, high standards of safety and quality. So of course we can look into different options on how to secure that third country devices have the same high standards entering the EU market. But as said, we have received many proposals, and we are still analyzing them and looking into them. So I would also trust that professionals using MedTech will not be using faulty devices. So at least this is what I believe. What I think is that we need to be very careful that we don't throw out the baby with the bars. So not lowering our standards, because if we lower them, this might also allow manufacturers from other parts of the world entering the market more easily, and hence not strengthening our resilience, but actually making us even more dependent from other parts of the world.
Julia, I think you can come right in here.
Yes.
What is your perspective?
Well, first of all, again, the proposal does not lower the safety architecture of the MDR. It just changes it to a more modern and more intelligent system of oversight. I just want to repeat that again. Europe's resilience, because you're right, we are losing, European manufacturers are losing some tenders to Asian companies mainly because of a high price pressure, because they cannot compete. But Europe's resilience does not depend on protecting its market only. It depends on remaining an attractive place where to innovate, where to develop, and where to produce and manufacture medical devices. So A resilient regulatory system is one that protects patients, ensuring that innovation, manufacturing, and investment remains in Europe. So protecting Europe by making the own European companies less competitive is not a sustainable way. We all need to compete globally and not regulate ourselves out of global competition. This is the way the manufacturers understand this topic. And at the same time, if we have this more efficient regulatory and intelligent system and processes, this would also free capacity for notified bodies to focus greater attention also on manufacturers entering the European market from outside the EU and to go there and inspect at their places and manufacturing places as well. So maybe it would strengthen both competitiveness and patient safety.
Mm-hmm. Droht, would you agree?
In general, on the concept, on the direction, absolutely, of course. Now, the question is, how do we get there? And here I would like to really emphasize that we need to look at cause and effect of what we are doing. And I picked two examples from aspects that are heavily discussed here. One is how to support SMEs. There are proposals within the proposal, there are some suggestions how to do that with like discounts, mandatory discounts to certain companies. Well, if we are looking at the global competition, we should be aware that more than half of the companies that would benefit from that are outside of the European Union. So if we want to keep focus on as a European, I agree to that, on the strategic supply that we have within Europe, to have supply chains as much as possible within Europe, then we need a more targeted approach, and we cannot have elements that would support even the industry outside of Europe more than those located in Europe. That's one. The other one example I would like to pick is we want to strengthen innovation, and we are confident that in Europe we still have innovative potential, and we want to use that innovative potential. Then we need to be very careful with the equivalence principle, because that is where manufacturers can use this to basically copy and paste it once a leading innovator has taken the burden to introduce something. And that is the balance where we cannot just look at one element and say, oh, we need to allow easier market access, so we strengthen the equivalence principle. On the other hand, we want to have really benefits for innovation. And one last comment regarding the safety of the device. The safety of the device is of the different device types is largely not regulated by the regulation or regulatory framework, but by international standards. And those are common standards that didn't change. So I think we can all agree that the expectation of what a safe medical device is, it didn't change with the regulation. What we are looking at is how do we ensure conformity. And I would like to throw in some evidence that we as a notified body has, and this is unfortunately so far only TÜV Süd data, but we will soon also expand that to all of the notified bodies. We did, since the MDR is in place, we did more than 7,000 technical assessments of different kinds of products. We've found more than 64,000 deficiencies on these products. This doesn't mean they are unsafe. It just means that the evidence for conformity is not sufficient. So it will not help by just ignoring that and not looking at that anymore and trying to cut out the follow-up cost to make that compliant. But we need to find an intelligent way of limit these findings to the relevant ones. Yeah, that we don't find a lot of things that are not relevant in the end for the patient safety. That is where we need to look at. And that is also, I think we can all agree, where we don't agree is how to get there. Yeah, but once again, the safety of the device is defined by the more or less international standards.
Yes, we've two hands up here, and I will give you the opportunity to respond, but I do have a question to both of you, in fact, because I know that's a topic that you care, Flora and Ancella. Medical devices and AI. In the proposal, the Commission wants to exclude medical devices from the Horizontal AI Act and regulate AI purely in the sectoral MDR and IVDR. I would like you also to take this into account and to say why, Flora, why you decided for this, and Ancella, also your point to this question, but of course you are also free to respond to the conversation we've had.
Thank you.
Ancella, yes, your first, please.
Thanks, and I'll be very brief for the sake of time. So on equivalence, I fully agree with what Roy mentioned. We actually need better clinical evidence, better clinical investigations. One of the proposals we have made also is to entrench in the MDR and IVDR cooperation with the HTA bodies. I think that's important, more cooperation between the MDCG HTA bodies. And then on the AI, so listen, the AI Act provides a harmonized and risk-based horizontal framework that is coherent across sectors that ensures high levels of consumer protection. Precisely because AI risks are not sector-specific. They cut across products, categories, value chains, and use context in ways that sectoral legislation cannot completely capture. The AI Act is about fundamental rights, so privacy, non-discrimination, human dignity. This requires also specific expertise that we think sits better in the AI-designated bodies. There can be, of course, and we can look at mechanisms of collaboration between notified bodies, AI Act bodies, but we don't think that the right approach would be to, let's say, fragment and dilute the AI Act by moving completely the MDR and IVDR, let's say, AI-related aspects into sectoral legislation. And we are also concerned of overburdening notified bodies now with the task to, beyond having to check about the AI-specific elements, beyond what the safety and performance requirement, which is their main, I think, competence and areas of expertise.
Thank you, Flora. You're still muted.
Act, because I think we do not depart from the AI Act. Our proposal aim at keeping the AI requirement, which are defined in the AI requirement, and brings it in one framework that in our approach is more simple, legal clarity, and predictable and effective. Notified bodies, and maybe Riot will follow up, they are already certifying those devices. They are already investing heavily in having the competence in the notified bodies to assess the AI requirement in the AI Act. So the only aspect, and I take the point from Ancella, absolutely, the human right and the oversight may need to be looked at because by moving the AI, the medical device from Annex A to B to Section A to B, we don't depart. AI Act is a regulation that it applies, but the specific requirement, what we want is to make sure that they are assessed and scrutinized in one framework with one set of notified bodies already certified. You know what it means that we have it? The status quo means that all the notified bodies need to be recertified for AI requirement, which they are already complying with, except one or two, which of course we need to look at, which means also a different way of certifying notified bodies, because in the AI Act is a national assessment and designation, in the MDR is a joint. And we know why it's a joint, because we come from an AI, from a national. So I think this move, to summarize, we don't want to lower or depart from the AI requirement. The contrary, we want to have them applied in one framework to do exactly what you mentioned and what the intention, I understand, are the user community. Legal clarity, safety, trust. But if you have two mechanisms doing it, you need not how do you certify a device which has a glucose monitoring with an algorithm? Who is certifying that? The AI authority or the MDR authority? In some cases are the same, in many, unfortunately, we see are not. And when we drafted the AI Act in the Commission, and when we drafted the Digital Omnibus, we were really clearly observing the implementation. And we see that implementation on the paper could have worked, but de facto is planning some challenges, and considering the high level of development already of the MDR, the Commission agreed to actually go in that way. But I close it here. Last comment, Roy admits, the 64,000 deficiency, true, but I remember as well the date, as you said, 64,000, many of those of an administrative nature, and that's where we want to target. Yeah, which is a lot. So they are, as you said, devices in Europe are safe. There are things we can improve. We all agree on the diagnosis. Let's adjust the cursor, but really keep proportionality and reality. Our proposal is based on what happens today and the capacity of the system to absorb many good ideas that, however, that needs to be implemented. We learned the lessons from the implementation, and that's where also comes the AI move. So I would really hope that the co-legislator could reflect on those, and we are happy, of course, to provide more and more background to give the evidence and the reassurance, because I see here it's a lot of clarification and reassurance. I think we all agree on what the final objective.
Point taken, Flora. Thank you, Roy. Please, one sentence, and then we will close.
One thing to these findings. Yeah, 1/3 is administrative. We should get rid of that as much as possible. I would also like to comment on that the authorities that are doing the surveillance on the notified bodies think that this is still not enough. They ask us to do more and more and more. Yeah, so we need to on the AI Act, and then I would like to close with something I fully agree with Flora here. We are capable of doing that. And don't forget, AI is not a new technology for us. In imaging, we are using AI in the devices for more than 10 years already. So now it's going into these other areas. We have the experts. For us as notified bodies, it doesn't matter so much if you do that in 1 or 2 regulations and with 1 or 2 designations. For the manufacturers, I think the important thing is that there is only one conformity assessment. And if we do that, with the AI Act, with medical in or out, for the manufacturers is to have the least burden here is one conformity assessment. That's what we are asking for, to not make that too complicated. Technical capability is there, just minimize the administrative burden for everyone.
And facilitate implementation. That's my really call for this move. Implementation. We are revising the regulation now because of the challenge in implementation. Let's not do the same.
Thank you, Flora. Really heated discussion. We could pursue for another hour. Timo, I would like to give you the last word. I think lots of stakeholders are interested in the process. Could you just shortly summarize what are the next steps in your committee and the Parliament? When do we probably have a final text agreed?
Yeah, okay. We are all working on that to make this as soon as possible, but I also have to say that I'm a bit not very happy that the rapporteur decided to have a very short timeline, because I think this will not give us the possibility to discuss all these topics in that detail which is necessary. So from European Parliament perspective, I can say that the rapporteur is about to hand in his draft report very soon. So we will have then the first exchange of views on July 14th with a deadline for amendment on the 20th or 22nd, if I recall it correctly. And then the goal is to finalize the position early 2027, either during January or February plenary session. But as I said, I do believe that if we need more time, we should not feel too bound on this timeline. And I think we need to pay close attention to all the proposals. I know that my team, for example, is going through it with Flora, with your team as well. And there are so many questions which have to be carefully looked at, that I would always argue at this time we need to get it right. And if this takes 2 or 3 weeks longer, then it's 2 or 3 weeks spent well. But this is only my personal feeling. So, but I would like to avoid a situation where we have to work with corrigendums again, so this wasn't the best way. But yeah, we will discuss it with the rapporteur. And yeah, there's surely a lot to be said also on AI, but I will not do it now to save some time. Just one last sentence, if you allow me. The most important thing is, for me, not where AI is regulated, but that it is done well. And also for that, I think we need some time. So let's see if we can make it already in the envisaged timeline. But again, I would say that we have to be cautious here, and if we need a bit more time, we should not shy away from allowing us that time. But it's not my decision; it's the rapporteurs in the end.
Great. This was already the closing word, Timo. This time we need to make it right. I think the discussion has really shown there are no simple answers. The challenge is to strike the right balance between several important objectives, one that combines patient safety, economic viability, and innovation. And only if we get this balance right, we as Europe will be able to maintain a strong, a competitive, and a trusted medical devices market in the future. So on that note, I would like to thank our speakers for this very insightful, lively, engaging discussions. It was great. And of course, thanks also to our audience for joining us today. I hope you've taken away some valuable insights. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope to see you again at one of our next TÜV meetups. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.